In this critical analysis of positive and negative, or constrictive and expansive beliefs, I want to begin by paying tribute to Tim Ferriss. His book, The 4-Hour Workweek, introduced me to the idea, the awareness of virtual assistants, which then led to me going on a hunt to find a virtual assistant, which led to me finding the best employee of my entire 30-year career as a business owner, which in turn leads me here today. If it wasn't for Devang Patel spending 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, to make all the difficult things easy, programming a film studio such as this, uploading videos, making any number of adjustments, that is responsible for deciding to run a nonprofit, deciding to grow my business in various ways, etc. Tim Ferriss led to Devang, which has led to an expansion. I'm just finishing another book, and it is Devang who's doing the layout, etc. So Tim has expanded my life indirectly by about 300 or 400% in a number of different areas. So thank you to Tim. And Tim is an explorer, of what works and what doesn't work in his own life, and focuses on meeting people that are expert in something. And he's interviewing one of his favorite professors at Princeton. That's what this whole Ed Shao. And Ed has an unusual degree of competency in bonding with students and in producing results, as you can look and listen to if you want to explore the interview. I've always enjoyed biographical interviews since the age of 12 or 13, and Tim offers a host of them, which is one of my media staples, downloaded offline, premium YouTube videos and audios without ads. And so anyway, I'm enjoying this conversation, but it's something that I want to invite into the Lazaris community, the Lazaris paradigm. Because what Tim is saying as a student is that Ed is one of the few professors at Princeton who came in early and prepared, and he's asking Ed about that.
Well, I was a strong believer in Murphy's Law. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. Yeah. And so I would come to the classroom typically 45 minutes early, make sure that the projector was working. I didn't want, and sometimes it wasn't. Yeah. And so I had time then to call the audio-visual people, and they'd come over and get it fixed, rather than showing up right at the time the class starts and then finding that there are problems that disrupted the flow of the class.
Okay, so this encapsulates, an issue that I have when doing belief work in the traditional Lazaris paradigm. Because what Lazaris would say to someone like Ed is, it maybe you want to change your belief for a positive one, rather than believe that if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. and use that as the basis to prepare, that you would change the belief and to a belief that, my classroom flows effortlessly and smoothly, right? But Lazaris does have, the decency, in my opinion, to say that all beliefs are false. Pick the ones that work, right? Well, this belief works. The belief that anything can go wrong will go wrong, leading to the choice to prepare more than any other teacher at Princeton, leads to the result of the students getting the message that they matter, of not having their AV stuff interrupted, etc., of a well-prepared professor that, a number of his students have started companies and rate his work highly, stay in touch with him 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. Students still reach out, as Tim is today, with this conversation. And so he's winning with a constrictive belief. Now, this brings up Bill Gates. If you read any of Gates' biographies, what stood out to me was his paranoia, his awareness of cycles, and how often small firms are, barraged, consumed, devoured by large firms when they begin to become a threat to a larger business. And so Gates was very paranoid about that. And as a result, one of the things he did was work incredibly hard, 100-hour weeks, in order to prevent that from happening. One of the reasons that Microsoft gathered a $30 billion cash fund was to make it absolutely clear that they could not be taken over in a hostile takeover, that they could not be bullied into settling, right? So this is a response, a successful response to paranoia, meaning Microsoft didn't get consumed out of that paranoia. And it's called constructive pessimism. So destructive pessimism is, it's never going to work out, it's not working out, it's never going to work out, so there's no point. That's destructive pessimism. But constructive pessimism, and interesting, in one study, and I say that because I don't remember where it was, but there was an interesting study by a credible source, in my mind, that pointed to the value, the power of constructive pessimism. In other words, that you have constructive optimists who expect things to go well and act as if they will go well. You have destructive optimists who expect things to go well and don't take the actions to make them go well. And you have destructive pessimists who expect things to go badly and so they don't make any effort at all, because what's the point? And then you have constructive pessimists who are aware how fragile reality is and work like hell. So you have an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates, a constructive pessimist, right? Aware of what could go wrong and putting in 100-hour weeks to make sure that they don't, to overcome, to reduce the probability that everything will go wrong. And so that's Ed, right? Ed's expecting the projector to not work a percentage of the time, and he doesn't want to allow that into his group, so he gets there 45 minutes early. He's expecting things to be chaotic when the students arrive, so he's arranging all their name tags. He's expecting he may forget some of the names if they don't have name tags, so he's an unusual professor who wants to call people by name, who wants to remember everyone's name, so he prepares name tags. so that he can address people by name. So expecting things to go wrong, willing to work hard enough that they don't, right? That's working really well. Now, I don't think concept synergy employs constructive pessimism. I don't think concept synergy looks at the data of their reality over the last 40, 50 years and says a lot of things have gone wrong, right? They're probably going to continue to go wrong, and we have to work harder to see that they don't, right? My impression is that concept synergy just blocks out everything that goes wrong, right? And doesn't send out surveys to find out what's going wrong in their relationship with clients, right? This guy does. This guy is interested in understanding his effectiveness, right? So when a news story comes along and asks, are business classes actually preparing students for business, or are they just wasting people's money and time? He sends out a survey to all his students and finds out what percentage of them have started companies, what percentage of them have found the class useful in various ways. And a lot of them have, right? Because he worked to overcome the probability field, the average, right? He expected average unless he did something different. And this is what makes me personally so uneasy with working with Lazaris belief work. I started it at age 14 to try and overcome the trauma of a disintegrating family into shame, into abuse, etc., outside my bedroom door. And I would do Lazaris belief work, and they'd still be fighting. And I'd be doing Lazaris belief work, and they'd still be fighting. And Lazaris would say that their techniques worked. But Lazaris didn't ask for the data. Lazaris didn't send out a survey. Neither did Concept Synergy. This guy did, right? And he never advised people to change their beliefs. He didn't work on his belief. He's starting out with the worst possible belief in positive psychology, right? Positive psychology is saying that if you change your psychology, your ideas, that your world will get better. Right? You change the idea and your world will get better. But that's not what he's doing. He's starting out with the worst possible belief. If anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. And thus, I'm going to work harder to see that it doesn't. He works harder and it doesn't. And his students get a better educational experience, right? He also critically analyzes the field at the time and understands that reading textbooks is not going to prepare people for business. So he brings in case studies. And he creates visceral stories of, what happened when this entrepreneur did this and did that, and what do you think they should do, and in created engagement, right? So there's a better curriculum. Now, this makes sense to me. It works, by the way, right? Why have I never been involved in a lawsuit in 30 years of business? Well, realizing very quickly that there would be misunderstandings between a client and a business owner. Why? Well, my clients would assume something, and then they would get mad when their assumptions didn't play out. Now, they hadn't told me that they assumed this, and I hadn't told them to assume it. But they did assume it, and then they were mad when their assumptions didn't play out. And so I realized that if I wanted to avoid misunderstanding, I would have to clarify what people should expect. And then I realized that people changed their memory of what I had told them verbally. And so I realized that in order for them to remember what I had said, it had to be written down. So that was the process. And so my contract in my business for every service that I do has roughly 30 different areas where someone may misunderstand and insert an assumption if it isn't spelled out in writing before any money changes hands, any final commitment is made. This is what you should expect, and this is what you shouldn't expect, and this is why you should expect it. This is why you shouldn't expect that. Do you understand all of that? Is that going to work for you? Okay. We both sign, right? That's constructive pessimism. That's saying that in a psychologically illiterate culture, where you get very little training on the psyche, on self, on relationship and agreement, relationship and agreements are going to go poorly. And so it's going to require a change in effort for things to go well. So a lot of what guides me is my anxiety level, right? This is also the antithesis of positive psychology, right? A lot of what guides Bill Gates is anxiety level. He's looking at where it can go wrong. Why? A lot of what guides Buffett is number anxiety. That's not a good ratio. I don't care what the hype is. That's not a good ratio. So if the most successful people in the result, more businesses started, more students respecting you, more classes going well, right? That's success. No lawsuits, no big fights and misunderstandings. That's success, right? 20% compounded returns over 50 years for Buffett. That's success. That's the goal, right? You have a choice. Do you want lots of lawsuits and misunderstandings? Do you want lots of clarity and no lawsuits? What's your goal, right? So Lazaris, I think, is kind enough to say all beliefs are faulty, pick the ones that work. But Lazaris doesn't pick the ones that work much of the time. Like, Lazaris doesn't encourage you to change a belief that everything will go wonderfully to a belief that everything that goes wrong that could go wrong is likely to go wrong at some point. And so here's your preparation. Right? See, that leads to fire extinguishers. That leads to getting your car tuned up. That leads to a safety set on a plane, right? Why do pilots with 6 years of experience go through a checklist? Because it reduces the odds of crashing. Because if they don't do that, more planes crash. So you do it in the assumption that you're going to forget something some of the time. You're going to get lazy. You're going to become complacent, which actually happens statistically. So I don't have an issue with belief work. I don't have an issue with picking the beliefs that work. I have an issue in an absence of data gathering. Concept synergy has never, and my belief, based on the attachment to delusion, my belief is that concept synergy will never send out an objective, full-bodied questionnaire to all of its clients and then publish the data. An objective, full-bodied means it covers all dimensions of the relationship. It looks at the positive and the negative and the cost to obtain the positives. That's a full-bodied, useful data set, right? If a drug company produces a drug, says these pills cost $200 a pill, and out of 1 million people, they save, what? 200 lives, whatever it is, and they create these side effects. That's an objective, full-bodied analysis that, do you want to take that pill? Now, drug companies are notorious for not publishing the full data, meaning they'll do it because they're required to by law, but what they do is they create 10 tests and then they conceal all the tests that show that they are a net negative in people's well-being. And then they publish the one test that shows that there's a 10% benefit. And then they tout this. You wouldn't want to give up a 10% benefit in your health, right? That's what pharmaceutical companies did. That's what went on with OxyContin. To addict a cult, to addict a culture based on selective dissemination of information. And the Lazaris data set is muddy, right? So they're not publishing the data. If you gather the data, it doesn't look great, right? Find me an ex-concept synergy employee who respects them, who admires them, the way they do business. I haven't found one, right? But there's 5 or more that hate them, right? So that's a bad data set, because you can find ex-employees of good companies that say, wow, those were some of the most educational, productive, respectful. I just became better as a person. I had a Facebook client, and I have a negative opinion of Facebook based on media and the data set that people aren't happier after using Facebook, so I don't use Facebook, right? But this employee was just talking about how brilliant the employee relationships were, and it was incredible. I had never seen anyone so organized. So Facebook is doing something really, really well. Walmart is distributing products cheaper. It's shipping products cheaper than any other enterprise on the planet, right? So they're doing different. So it's good to understand what an identity, what an organization is doing well and what it's doing poorly. And what you measure gets results, right? So concept synergy doesn't measure anything. I've never gotten a survey, and they blockade information. Now, is that out of positive psychology, the delusion that everything's going wonderfully and the affirmations about that, versus what works? Why is concept synergy committed to failed protocols with dismal statistics based on positivity that isn't working as well as a guy that says, I believe strongly that if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So I'm going to work harder to see that that doesn't happen and that gets high-level results. See, it doesn't matter if he believes in channeled entities. He's getting a result. He's doing something that works. And that's really the emphasis that, that I bring to this thing. There are things that work with Lazaris. And there are things that don't work. There are things that work with concept synergy, and there are things that don't work. There are things that work with certain relationships between clients and concept synergy, and there are things that don't work. But they're not being analyzed. They're not being anticipated. They're not being measured. They're not being published. Right? It's a dysfunctional, low growth, high secrecy, high shame ecology. Don't ask, don't tell, you speak and will control and suppress. Right? So my body gets uncomfortable as I move from beliefs that work very well, pessimistic beliefs. Right? I'll meet a client and I'll scan for what's likely to go wrong. I look at the way the wife treats the husband. I look at the way the husband treats the wife in the stereotype, right? Most of my clients are still husband and wives, right? I'll look at the level of chaos. I'll ask about past contracting relationships. Right? And if it turns out that the client tells me how every contractor they hire is fucked up, right? No one understands, right? I realize I'm dealing with a difficult client. So I expect that if I don't do something proactive and different, I'm going to be one of those fucked up contractors blamed for the incompetence of the client. So I have to figure that out. I have to figure out where is this client incompetent? Can I do anything to compensate for that? Can I get a win out of this? That's a question. I fired a client recently. I thought, no, this is going towards losing before we began the work, right? You have the most difficult parking of any job I've encountered. You've got a picky tenant that doesn't want to be disturbed in this hours and that hours. You're picky. You're adding things with an entitled attitude that aren't in the contract, but demanding they be done. It's too many difficult things for me to overcome. So I listed them out to the client. I said, I already have to deal with my crew who doesn't listen to me 20% of the time. They're still the best crew that I've found, but there's 20% ineptitude there. And whether that's my ineptitude for not training them or my ineptitude for not finding better people, that whatever it is, I have to deal with 20% ineptitude with the crew. I have to deal with your parking. I have to deal with your entitlements. I have to deal with your energy, right? Your entitled energy. I have to deal with your tenant. I said, there's too many things to overcome in one job. So I think the obvious thing is not to work together, right? I get chronic fatigue stressing about all these things. So let's not work together. Or let's lower the dose, right? Let's get the dose of, this is like 80% stress for me. Let's get it down to 20% stress. How could we do that? So we could either disengage or we could reconfigure things down at a manageable level where I can overcome that. Well, he didn't want me to leave, right? So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to change the schedule and put it at the end of the year when I've got nothing on the other side that's time sensitive. He didn't like that, but I said, that's the only way I'm going to do it, right? We're going to change this expectation. We're going to add a fee for you being a difficult client. You're going to pay me an extra $2,000 for being difficult here, and an extra $1,000 for being difficult here. And you're going to have to decide whether to listen to a picky tenant and not do an elaborate project, or do an elaborate project and understand that has impact, right? So we renegotiated. Now, why? I'm noticing my body is getting more and more uncomfortable. And I don't want, if it's that uncomfortable going into the situation, I don't want it to become more uncomfortable. So that's using fear, anxiety, body tension, stress as a gauge to analyze probability fields accurately, meaning my body's pretty well attuned. Now, I can change the belief, right? It just is an exercise in martyrhood and stupidity. I can look, at a controlling, cold, self-absorbed client, and I can say, I have wonderful clients, right? I have magnificent clients. Things will work out for the best. It's just a dumb belief. Right? You look at the probability field of the situation and you say, let's change this, let's change that. I'm no longer going to do this. And, I understand that if this isn't a good fit for you, we'll walk away, right? And maybe you can find someone who can do all these things with all these skills that I have, who's able to park in this tiny spot and do this. Maybe you can do that. If you can, the field is yours. But if not, we're going to have to renegotiate. See, that actually works. And I understand it works because it has a track record of working. What he's doing works. Right? And so my concern is the closed loop element. Right? Concept synergy blockades any information of effective techniques from other people coming into the concept synergy field. You can't talk about other businesses in workshops. You can't talk about them in the forum. Can you email about them? Kind of, maybe, right? But is it viewed as like there are many things that work better than Lazaris in this area for this type of personality, for this type of person? Or is it viewed as, your negative ego, right? Well, when Lazaris says that they're the highest consciousness, and when they say that they're the highest resonance, and when they say that it's all about resonant causation, when they say that their techniques work, and if they don't work, it's not because they're doing a bad technique, it's because you are. That's actually not a very good protocol for a win-win relationship. If I go to my wife and I say, I'm a higher resonance than you, and resonance is the ultimate reality creation, and I'm not going to go down to your level. No. You're going to come up to my level or we're going to separate. And everything that I say is more insightful than what you can see because I see from a higher perspective. And my techniques and my advice works. See, it worked over there, it worked over there. Works. So if you don't take my advice and pay me for it, and then it doesn't work, it's because you didn't want it to work, you have agendas, all this stuff, right? How's my wife going to respond to that? But because it's channeled information, right? Like, what's the difference? Who cares? It's poopy information, it's gooky information, it's scientific information. The only thing that matters is, does it work or not for you? Now, if Ed is in negative ego and all that, right? And it's working for him, great. More negative ego, please, right? It's just words, right? He's getting the result. Psychologically, Tim is grateful to him. 20 years later, Tim is grateful to this professor. That worked, right? Now, of course, what Lazaris does works to some extent as well, right? There are many people grateful to Lazaris, including me, right, for what works. And I'm not grateful to Lazaris for what doesn't work. And I'm not grateful to Lazaris for shame and crazy-making stupidity. I'm not grateful for the lack of data. I'm not grateful for concept synergy's control and domination protocols around dealing with any of this. I'm not grateful that it takes publishing this stuff on YouTube to have any kind of transparency. I'm not grateful for that. I would like the forum to have a section called Lazaris and concepts. I would like a concept synergy dysfunction. Let's have a discussion of everything concept synergy is doing wrong. How many people agree with this? How many people agree with that? I think it's great if concept synergy wants to be excellent. And what all the things about Lazaris that don't work and seem crazy. That'd be a great section in the forum. Not in competition for all the other stuff, right? That's there too. Just both sides with a full data set. With nobody being kicked off the forum. I mean, it's fine if you just say that person isn't someone we think is, we like. Maybe they have something better to say than the people you like, or the sheep that go along and say the things that are your particular dogma without gathering data, right? So this belief thing has made me uneasy, since the age of 12. And this kind of gets to the heart of it. Going into the room of belief and changing a belief, I've never seen a result other than anxiety. But expecting the things that are happening and have been happening to continue to happen until a force equal or greater changes the dynamic, and then acting as if the things that have been happening will continue to happen, right? I'm expecting concept synergy to continue blockading information and negative feedback. They've done it for 40 years. Why would they stop now? It's obviously adequate. They're not growing as a business, but it's adequate. They don't have to. They've got a monopoly on the highest resonance to ever touch the planet. Why should they clean up their act, right? Why do they have to grow, right? But that also helps to understand the shadow side of Lazaris in Jach and Penny's life. You see, Jach hasn't had to grow as much as a human being as he might without Lazaris choosing him, right? Because there's an associative connection. Why did Lazaris choose Jach of all people, right? He could have chosen Michael. He could have chosen Penny and just had a psychic relationship. Why did Lazaris choose Jach, right? So there's the highest resonance chose Jach. So Jach gets kind of a free pass. He doesn't do something he says he's going to do. He doesn't apologize, and maybe that's the spiritual thing to do, right? So that hurts Jach's development. People don't want to do a Yelp page on concept synergy because maybe that's negative ego, right? So that hurts Jach and concept synergy. They don't get critical feedback. I get critical feedback all the time. That could have been better. And my answer to the client is, you're right. That could have been better. I don't obviously have the talent to do it better, or I would have done it, but it could have been. And I'll take that in mind. And let me ask you, like, would you have paid, like if I'd brought this person in and done that, it would have cost, let's say, $5,000 more. Would I have helped you better if I charged you $5,000 more and that bit didn't happen? Or it could have been better, but you wouldn't want to pay the cost it needed to be better. Okay, well, now I know, right? So next job, we'll add in you $5,000. Or next job, you just understand that you just saved $5,000 by not having that bit be as good as it could have been, right? So those are the trade-offs. And as long as you know the pros and cons as much as possible going in, there's no right or wrong choice. You value money more, you're more picky, you've got plenty of money, you don't, right? Because that also goes back to the client, right? You didn't ask about that. You didn't want to pay the money. You're already trying to cut the cost down. But you want it to be done more expensively, right? Well, that's on you, client. Get better at picking contractors, or get better at this, or find something else. But if you can't find anyone, if we're in the top 1%, which we are in a number of areas, if we're in the top 1% statistically, and it's not good enough, and you're not willing to do the effort to find the top 1% of 1%, right? Well, that's on you. It's not a perfect world. It's just getting slowly better with time.